Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. It's amazing to have you guys here. Today, we're going to be covering SQL. There's been lots and lots of questions in our group, so I thought it may be helpful to do a session on SQL. Just as an intro, my name is Sarabjeet Daya. I manage the Business Analyst and Scrum Master in Demand Facebook group and YouTube channel. So if you guys have any topics that are of concern that you'd love for us to cover, let us all know. And if I can't cover it myself, I'll always try to connect with others that can cover the topics. Today, I'm very, very, very happy to announce our speaker and our presenter is going to be Birinder. He's like a younger brother to me. He was just one more thing, Birinder. He was the second person that I helped transition out of my program. So as of today or as of yesterday, I've helped 75 people transition into business analyst, Scrum Master, product owner, which I didn't think I was even doing, but the concepts are very similar, right? So as of yesterday, I've helped 75 people transition into this role. And Birinder was my second person that I helped transition. So he's very special to me because he was one of my first few that I was able to help. And with that, Birinder, I'll hand it over to you. He's going to be covering SQL today with you guys. Let's try to keep the session to half an hour and 15 minutes towards the end for Q&A. And with that, I'll hand it to you, Birinder.
Thank you, sir. So thank you for being a great mentor, as you have been. And hello, everybody. My name is Birinder, and I'll be presenting SQL for Business Analysis presentation to you guys today. So for a brief introduction, I'm a business system analyst, and I have been working in the BAs from last 6 years. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. So let me know if you guys cannot see my screen.
I can see it. You're good.
Okay. So today we are going to talk about SQL and business analysis and the importance of SQL in the role of a business analyst. So these are the topics that we'll be covering today. SQL and your career as a business analyst, how to turn data into information, SQL basics, and understanding data structure, how to get started with the queries, and how to sell your SQL skills to your company, and interview advice at the last. So I'll go over a couple of instructions before we start. So you guys are welcome to send all your questions in chat. So all questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, and please raise hand if you're unable to hear me or you cannot see my screen. And if there are any questions that I'm not able to cover in this session, please post in the business analysis group. I'll add my answers over the weekend. And please put yourself on mute if you're not talking. Thank you. So we'll start with the question, like, what's the phenomenal reality of data in today's world? So as you guys can see on the slide, like Google processes 40,000 search queries every second and processed 27.5 billion search queries in 2001 compared to 1.2 trillion in 2012, and it's still growing. And same for YouTube, like 6 hours of video content was uploaded every minute in 2007 compared to like 400 hours per minute in 2015, and it's still growing. And same goes for Facebook and Amazon. With each passing day, with each passing second, greater and greater quantities of data is being collected. In the time it takes us to finish this sentence, over 500,000 Google search queries have been executed. And YouTube has the same thing going. Like, meanwhile, smartphones and social media have turned everyday individuals across the globe into an exponentially growing army of data generators. And they are constantly creating new records that reveal our current interests, activities, or thoughts, feelings, you just name it. So businesses and government agencies, they are all accepting the reality that maximum efficiency and maximum profitability cannot be achieved without harnessing the power of data. So while the volume of data being generated is astounding in its own way, what's mind-blowing is that we have only just begun to make use of it all. So only half of the data collected is ever analyzed. So if individuals, businesses, and governments, they were able to make better use of collected data, then the potential upside would be limitless because there's a lot of data that's still not analyzed as of now. So profits and efficiency that could be increased if we do that. And marketers could gain more powerful insight into target audiences, and more fraud and crime could be prevented by using the patterns that we have in data. And this is just a beginning. Like if you go into the little minute details we come across in data patterns, it's very interesting. So the shortfall in data and business analysis contribute to an incredible demand for skilled data handling professionals. So this is where a role of business analyst comes in. So understanding businesses driven by data and making business decisions based on that. So why is SQL an important skill for a business analyst? So business analysts, they use data for reporting, and those reports sometimes need to be customized as per client demand. And sometimes technical teams do not understand data from a business perspective. For example, like if you go to one of your developers, you will let them know that I need transactions that have been made from the month of January till the month of February. And they have this kind of flag on it. Like, for example, they are flag transactions. So they will just give you the list of those transactions, and they are going to be like 100,000 or million, billion, trillion of transactions. You as a business analyst, you are supposed to know what's the business use of this data and how to look at it. What are the filters that you need to put on? So if you know that, it makes your job very easy to analyze that data. It saves you a lot of time, and it gives you awesome results as you do the analysis of that particular data. So understanding data from a business perspective, business analysts, they know what they want and how it shall look like. At this point, if you have SQL skills, you can fill the gap between the technical and business team in terms of scope of reports required, or in terms of the scope of analysis that you guys are doing. So analysis is one of the cardinal part of a business analyst job, and everything in the project is dependent on the analysis part moving forward. SQL knowledge, it makes your job easier for analysis. You can take a deep dive into data and draw patterns to see how the business has been structured, and what are the bottlenecks in revenue growth, and how this all could be improved. So drawing patterns after analysis leads to good business decisions. So SQL, it's basically a tool for data extraction. So for example, like a database is there, but like you have to talk to the database in the language that database understand, which is SQL or structured query language. So if you need any information from the database, you will have to know SQL to extract that information. So that's a lot of data sitting in the data warehouse. If you know what you need and you know how to get it, half of your job is already done. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Somebody was not on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Keep going.
So basically, like SQL business analysts are like, because they do not go back to the developers and bug them to get the reports done. They get everything done by themselves. because they know SQL. So making everybody's life easier. So now we'll talk about the process of transforming data into knowledge. So we have a lot of raw data that's being generated by, you can say like social media or any other platform that are using information technology. So they are generating data at each and every point. So what happens is that that data is being collected in the databases, and once the data is collected, it's organized in some sort. Like, for example, there is a data, let's say just healthcare data. So healthcare data includes a lot of dimensions, I would say. So you have the patient demographics, and then you have all the conditions, health conditions they have, and you have all the insurance information and all the program information they are enrolled in that gives them benefits or some sort of help from the government. So that all that data comes collectively in a single file, and it depends on the people who are organizing it, how they organize it, and after organizing, like that's a lot of data, but eventually what you need is just a small portion of data if you're analyzing something, because you're not analyzing each and everything in the data at one point. So what you're doing is you're kind of organizing the data, and then later you're summarizing it. You're kind of narrowing it down to couple of hundred records, and then you start analyzing it. Then you start keep looking at it to draw patterns, like if there is any deviation from the given threshold or not. So if you find anything, then you report it, and then you kind of process it, synthesize it. So it's basically how you transform data into information, and then you transform information to knowledge. So what happens is, like, for example, you receive a patient information file that has all the patient demographics, where the patient was born, where the patient was admitted, what's the date of birth, what's address, what are the conditions, and what dates they went to the hospital. So how you will collect this data, it depends on the database you are using, and then you can organize it in all the proper columns the way you understand it, and then you just take the chunk of information by summarizing it, and then you analyze it if that information is giving out any patterns or not. If it is giving out patterns, then you analyze the whole data set, and you kind of synthesize that data, and then you present it to your team, to your management, and they can make a business decision based on that output that you have provided them.
I have a question. I know I said that we would hold questions till the end, but as a business analyst and as PM, I generally don't get involved with the nitty-gritty of data fields, right? So where can someone like me, so if I'm now, said or told that, I need to pay attention to SQL or it's going to become part of my job, where can I find out all the data fields that are related to my project?
So if you're asked to perform as analysis that involves the access to the database, so what your company would do is they would give you access to those databases. They will kind of contact you and give you a list of all those databases, and then you can take a deep dive in there, like go and take a look at the raw data and try to understand the data in the tabular form that we have in our databases.
Mhm.
So, for example, it's any transactional history of a credit card. So you will be able to download it, and you will be able to go through it. It will have different column names:
Okay.
name of the credit card holder, the merchant that credit card was used at, and then
Mhm.
the date of transaction, the amount of transactions that was executed this very same day. So that way, it is quite an exercise to get to know data, but
Right.
knowing the business first helps a lot, because that gives you a perspective when you're looking at data.
What about data dictionary? Can somebody that's absolutely new at analyzing data take advantage of a data dictionary if it exists? I know lots of organizations don't keep those up to date, but at least that may be a starting point to understand what all the different data fields they're looking at are, right?
Absolutely. So if the company is maintaining a data dictionary, that's kind of a best practice for managing data.
Mhm.
So you can trace down each and every single field that you have in your database, and you'll have the definition over there, the data type, and the length of data, and you will come to know like what's the significance of the data and what are the dependencies to the other data elements that are present in the same data field.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
But it's kind of pretty synonymous with the relational databases, the new database systems like the cloud and everything. These practices are not very popular with them right now, but if everything is getting done by the book, data dictionary is the best practice.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing, right? Best practices generally are not practiced because people get busy. People change from different roles, so it just is sometimes hard to maintain after a project's been kicked off.
Yeah, you're right about that because if we talk about the business analyst role, they're not supposed to know SQL, but now each and every day we come across a lot of job descriptions and they're expected to know SQL because everybody is trying to kind of.
Yeah. And I think general sense is if you work on a data dictionary, it makes it easy for you to even write better requirements, right? And so I think by listing these elements in job descriptions now, they're just trying to make sure that somebody, even if they're not requiring your part of your job may not be to collect data or run these reports, right? It just is a way to make sure that you can look at data and make some sense out of what it is that you're looking at. So I think generally that's what that's around, but you're the expert, so I'll let you continue.
So sometimes what happens is that companies are migrating from a legacy system to a new system. So what they would expect of you is to record all the data feeds and map it back to the new system so that a new database could be created and things could be get done according to the legacy database.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to our next slide. So what is structured query language? And it is basically how we communicate with the database, and it is used to store, manipulate, retrieve, and modify data. And it's the most common and the oldest language that's being used for creating and querying relational databases. So with the help of SQL, you can streamline the data into useful information, and you can also build stored procedures that act as rule engines, and you can apply all the metrics and key performance indicators when you generate reports using SQL. So understanding databases, one of the simplest tools to record and visualize data is the table. So when you see table, think of it as a two-dimensional grid consisting of rows and columns. So databases collection of data arranged for ease and speed of search so that it could be retrieved easily by the computer. So purpose of the database is to facilitate the interaction, organization, and analysis of related data across a multitude of sources. A database is composed of tables, and tables are composed of records. So rows in a table are considered records. So, for example, I would say you have a table that has different columns, like column one says first name, column two says last name, and column three says the date of birth, and it has all that sort of information. And then one of the last column is known as ID. That is going to be unique for each and every user. So, for example, let's just speaking hypothetically, let's create a table that has first name, last name, and then your email address, your date of birth, and then it has a unique ID. There are like 5 to 10 users in that table. And then there's another table with 3 to 4 other columns that have data for the same people that are in there. And that the second table contains data regarding the health information. So if you have to retrieve data from the second table, you will need the ID. That's also common in the second table. So you have one common key in both the tables. So you can write the query that this ID needs to be summoned, and this ID has this particular health information. I need it from other database. So you just need to enter that ID, and it will pull information from the other table as well. So this is how it works. It's basically, this is what we call a relational database, that there are a couple of tables like 10, 20, 100, or there could be any number of tables. And they have one unique primary key that is a common factor among all the tables. So if you have to get a record from all those tables at different times, so you can use that key for each and every record. So it will give you the information for that particular person that that primary key is associated with. So data can exist as a variety of different data types, such as strings of text, numbers, and special characters. So the tables are designed according to that. Like they have different types of data in there, and but the primary key that you guys are going to make join to, it's going to be of the same data type.
Hi, this is Pallavi here. Sorry to interrupt you. And how is the foreign key related here? I mean, I keep on coming across foreign key and primary key, so I want to understand the difference.
So foreign key is something that's secondary to the primary key. So primary key is unique. So there is not going to be a record that will have a duplicate, right? So there's a table, you have a primary key, and there's another table, you have the same primary key in that table. So if you join both the tables, there will be no duplicate records. The foreign key is the key where you can find the duplicate records. For example, it's sort of like it will have the same primary key, but foreign key will be different. It's kind of a parent and child record, right? So a parent record is the one with the primary key, and the foreign key record is one that will have two records. It is kind of a parent-child relationship record in both.
Okay.
But it's like, to be honest, it's nice to know. Like what I suggest is like there are about, I would say, 25 to 30 statements of SQL that every BA should know. So you guys should go through each and every statement and read about 3 to 4 sentences regarding that statement's significance and the features, like what the statement does.
Okay.
But you need not to be kind of spending more than like 30 minutes on data.
And how can we get access to those statements? Are they publicly available somewhere?
Yes, I'll share the resources
Okay.
at the end of this presentation. So it's wfreedschools.com. So that's one of the excellent sources to learn SQL. If you have access to that, I think everybody does. So it's a public page, I think. Yeah. So there are a lot of tables you can go and access over there. And the key is practice. If you lose touch, you again have to start from scratch, right? If you keep doing it every day, you get good with it. But for starters, W3 Schools is a very good resource.
Okay, I want to do a time check. Maybe 5 more minutes of presentation, and then we can open up to Q&A. So let's, Birinder, get through the content, and then we'll open it up for Q&A towards the end.
Sure. So now we'll talk about database structure, like how a relational database functions, what are the data types associated with it, and how does relational database management systems work, and what are database tables and records. So as I mentioned earlier, like table is a two-dimensional grid of rows and columns that contain data, and there are different types of data that sits in the table, and could be anything, could be text, number, integers, or special characters. So relational databases, they can contain many tables. Each table in a relational database should have a primary key that serves as a unique identifier for that table. And foreign key, as we discussed, is in any column in the table that exists as a primary key in another table. So the relationship between tables and their primary and foreign keys is called a database schema. And it can be shown visually by an entity relationship diagram, which functions as a blueprint for the database. It's kind of a diagram, a diagrammic representation of the database. It will contain a lot of tables and the joins to each of the primary keys and foreign keys. It will tell, in a sense, that how a table looks like and how it sits in the database and how it relates to another table. So there are a variety of different relational database management system. It's basically called RDBMS, and there are like many of them available in market that are being used by major companies like Oracle Database and Microsoft SQL Server. That's the most prominent one. Then we have IBM DB2 and MySQL. So they all differ in many different ways. They all share the structured query language as a backbone. So if you know SQL, you'll be able to access all these database systems. So how to get started with queries? There are a couple of SQL query basics and key SQL commands that all these need to know if they are into SQL and they are into a SQL role that requires them to retrieve and extract data from a database. And the select keyword is the most common SQL command used in SQL queries. And SQL statements, they can contain multiple clauses using different SQL keywords. So the best practice for converting SQL queries is to convert them into natural language questions. For example, you're being asked that we need all the people in this table whose last name is Smith and they are born between this and this date, and they live in that particular city, that particular county with this particular zip code. So if you get into the syntax more, you will get confused while writing a query. So you will have to convert it into plain English and then write the query. That will be very helpful, because otherwise what happens is people lose track of what they're looking for. They get into technicalities, but it's plain English. If you are able to convert them in these queries into natural questions, you will be like doing a lot better. So this is one of the SQL best practices, and the more you practice, the more you will know. It's basically it gets synced with your brain when you keep doing it, and you will be able to like crack all the different queries without any hesitation. So now we'll talk about selling your SQL skills in job market. So SQL nowadays, it's, as you guys all know, since you guys have been applying for different jobs, so it's considered industry standard nowadays, and it's pretty high in demand, and it kind of adds up to your resume as it allows quick access to useful information. It makes you an individual who is kind of independent, because otherwise if a person is doing a business analyst role and that person does not know SQL, what he is going to do is he's going to go about the developers or other team members to get that data, and they do not want that. They want people who are independent to get these kind of tasks done. And also what happens is when you take a deep dive into data, you get the ability to see the bigger picture. So you know the business perspective of that business, like being a business analyst. But when you take a deep dive into data, you get the ability to see the bigger picture, like how the stats actually look like. And it's, as we all know, it's higher salaries for the technical BAs. So it's a good skill to add to your resume. And a little interview advice I would like to give is that memorizing syntax, it's not the bar of acceptance. In an interview, if you think that you'll memorize the syntax and you'll throw out some technical terms, it's not going to fly. So think of it as a natural plain English queries, questions. You can think of them like that and then convert them into the SQL part. That will be helpful for you guys. Even if you are asked any interview question to create a SQL query, it's not going to be super technical. It's just going to be a basic one. So I would suggest not to waste more time on learning hardcore SQL. You just need to know the lighter version. So also don't get fixated on a specific SQL tool, because everything works differently, but SQL is going to be the same. There's going to be minor difference in the way we will be using SQL with different tools, but 90% of the content is going to remain the same. And when retrieving data from the database using SQL, focus on the results. So if your query is good, are going to get the good results. So don't get fixated on how you're getting the results or how you're going to get it. But if you have a result-oriented outlook while writing the query, you will nail it. So, and always look for the bigger picture and practice more. So W3 Schools is an excellent source for learning SQL. It's not too complicated. It's so simple to use, and it makes you practice after each exercise, each learning exercise. So please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, now let's open it up for questions from everyone. Okay, I see one coming in. It says, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being advanced, how would you rate the knowledge of SQL a SQL BA should have?
I would say about 5. The basic knowledge of SQL is what a business analyst should have, because it's not going to take you more than like 10 hours to learn that level of SQL. It's pretty simple. So you can spend like 30 minutes each weekend, and in a month or so, you'll be good to go.
Yeah.
So you don't get fixated on learning the tougher syntaxes or the data conversions. Just keep in mind one thing, that you just need to retrieve the data and you're not changing anything. What access you will be given is going to be read-only access. So you'll be only able to read data. You are not supposed to change it, and you won't be able to change it if you don't have the access. So all you need to do is just look at the data and retrieve the right data. That's it. And for that, you just need 5 out of 10.
Yeah, and I think generally companies are requiring that, because we write requirements for enhancing or building systems, right? So a better understanding of data allows you to write better requirements, right? It allows you to ask better questions of your stakeholders. So I think the gist of even listing these things on the resume or job description is so that you have an understanding of what data is. So get into the practice of reading and understanding data dictionaries, as Birinder said, right? Get into the habit of understanding the data and the bigger picture about what it is that this data is allowing your customers and you as a company to do would help you understand where this is all going. Another question in the chat is, would there be a possibility of working with stored procedures or triggers?
No, that's too far-fetched. You're not expected to work with stored procedures and triggers because that's what the developers do. So, and these are the procedures and triggers. They are kind of changing data. So you are not supposed to change. It's writing data. You just have read access. You'll retrieve data. You'll be able to see data, and download it, but you're not able to change it. So you will not be working with stored procedures or triggers.
Okay. Another similar question was, are BAs required to create stored procedures and views? So it's similar to, I think, what you just answered.
Stored procedure changes data, so no for stored procedure. Views are what a reflection of data is. It's easier to access. It puts less load on the database. So if you are using a production table, it will be kind of spinning a lot of wheels at the back end. And if you're using a view, so it's much easier to use. It's kind of a copy of data, and but it's not the one that we see in production. You can create it. You will be given a query to create it. You will not be expected to create a view from scratch, and you will not have access to it. So no for both.
Sounds good. And I think there's one more question from Pallavi. Hey, Pallavi. This was wonderful and informative session. Have to drop. Okay, no more questions, I guess. Any other questions?
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
No worries. Good to see you, Pallavi.
About tables? No, you will not be able to create any tables. Like you're not expected to create ones. That's pretty complicated. So just simple. Normalization is what data modelers do. So normalization is like you receive data in a lot of different forms. For example, you will receive data like the transactional data for any credit card transaction. The file that you will receive, it will have all kind of information, the credit card owner information, the bank information, and the transaction information, and what time the transaction was made, and how much was it, and what location it was. So to normalize data is like, for example, I need just the amount of transaction in the person's first name, last name, and the merchant name where the transaction was made. So what I'll do is I'll just keep that information for myself, and I'll get rid of the rest. So that's how we normalize data.
Yeah. So the next question is, as a BA, you said you may have to create reports. So we have to use any data visualization tools like Power BI or Tableau.
So it depends on the company you're working for. If they are using Power BI or Tableau, so they will kind of let you know like how to connect to it, or it's just like it's a tool that connects like directly to your database, and you will write query in these tools, and they will retrieve data for you. The only difference is that instead of seeing the results in tabular form, they will show you results in graphs or in form of reports. So what is a report? Think of it like this, like a report. I'll give you requirements to report me on like 2 to 3 points on a data that we have for cities water sewage system. So I want to know the figure, how much water is being used each and every day in each and every household, and the average of water that's being used each month, and the aggregate of water that's being used in 12 months. So you have to write query for it, and you put it in a table, or you can just write that query in Power BI or Tableau, and they will give you graphs of different aggregations and stats that have been made by those results. So that's how a report is. You can do all the hard work in Excel. If your company have good tools like Power BI or Tableau, you can make them do that work. So, but it's simple aggregation query that you'll have to write.
Okay. And I think the last question that we have is, how can we practice data mapping analysis or even access if we are just starting as a BA and not working?
So I would suggest going to w3schools.com, and you can, the data mapping is totally different, and analysis is also a different thing. But if you have to go to W3 schools to learn SQL, first you learn it, then there are some other platforms where you get access to dummy tables, where you can go and create your own analysis. Like you come across questions in that resource, like they will ask you to like create a report, or they will ask you to do some aggregation based on the demographics of data they have, or they will just ask you to collect data about data, that's metadata, and you can do that. But that's the third step. First step would be learning SQL, second would be practicing it, and then third would be analysis. And data mapping is what you will come across if you are in a project where you are mapping data from different sources, either from a legacy system to a new system, or you are incorporating or instituting a new system into your database. So you'll be creating a new table, and you will be mapping all the incoming data from the source to your target tables. So they're like pretty different terms, data mapping and analysis.
Yeah. All right, guys, I think we are at time. Any last questions you guys may have? Okay, perfect. Birinder, thank you so much for this. This was extremely helpful. I appreciate that you spend the time to put this together for us. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to more collaborative sessions like this in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone who joined as well. Thank you. See you guys. We'll have more of these sessions on different topics as we go on. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, guys.